we didn't have any of these animals. They were gone from the landscape. And where we're at today, we're living in the best of times.
We're looking to get out, 160 collars a year.
You think you've heard it all, but like I didn't know honestly until just recently when I came to work here that, how much of a predator a black bear is, especially on whitetails.
No matter the season, you always want to find the food.
Black bears, all of our great 480 species here in Pennsylvania that we manage, they're all wild animals. We need to let them be wild. Hello and welcome to Call of the Outdoors, the podcast of the Pennsylvania Game Commission. Pretty cool podcast today. We have our brand new bear biologist, Mr. Brandon Snavely. We're going to talk all things black bears and try to help everybody become a little bit more BearWise this year. Welcome to Call of the Outdoors. For Pennsylvania hunters and conservationists, our roots run deep. The episodes we bring to you on the Pennsylvania Game Commission's podcast, Call of the Outdoors, will take a deep dive into exposing the incredible work being done by agency staff and partners, including statewide habitat projects, the science behind wildlife management, and what drives agency decisions. The Pennsylvania Game Commission's mission is twofold: to manage and protect wildlife and their habitats for not only current but future generations, and to promote hunting and trapping in the Keystone State. So, Brandon, we've been real excited about getting together today because when, you talk about black bears in Pennsylvania, there's a lot of ears, a lot of people. It's almost the holy grail to a lot of our hunters. And man, thanks
right.
for coming over, and we're excited to hear about it. So let's talk about you. And, you're not new with the agency, but your position where you're at is new. And where you came from and how you got to where you're at today.
Yeah, that's right. And, it's great to be back. I grew up in Pennsylvania, right by Middle Creek. Basically got interested in the outdoors at a young age, hunting, fishing, camping, all those kinds of things. And from there, that really drove me to where I wanted to go for an undergraduate degree. Knew I wanted to get into biology of some sort. So I went to Paul Smith College. It's a small little school in northern New York. Yep. So I spent 4 years there. My degree was actually in environmental science, and I got minors in GIS and chemistry, so just kind of all over the board, but focused a lot on natural resources and wildlife management when I was there. And then really from there, my junior year, the summer in between, I got my first job with the Pennsylvania Game Commission. So it was just a summer term position. It was up in the Susquehannock State Forest. I was trapping bears and running trail cameras for predators. So that was part of our fawn predation study that had occurred back there in 2015. And then went back to Paul Smith's, finished my senior year, and actually got hired back onto the project that subsequent summer in 2016. And did the same thing that summer, and then ended up coming on full time the fall of 2016 as the bear biologist aide.
You worked with Mark Turnett at that time.
Yeah. So I was under Mark Turnett for that most of that duration that I worked. So I was in that position from 2016 through the end of 2020. And just doing everything from bear trapping to collaring bears, to going into dens, to running trail cameras and just basically everything bears.
Yeah, we've had Mark on before, and he was, talked about his past when he, went into a den with grizzly bears, which that takes a special kind of person. I mean, there's not too many people in this room that would do that. For sure.
I haven't done that yet. We'll see if I make contacts out west.
There you go.
And something like that.
You would do that? It wouldn't bother you at all?
Yeah, I would try it once. But yeah, so then really from there, I spent several years with the agency then, and there was a little bit of restructuring going on, and there was a opportunity for myself to go get a graduate degree. And this was with the agency, with the Pennsylvania Game Commission. They had partnered with, it was actually South Dakota State at the time, professor there, Robert Lonsinger, who was my advisor. So they had partnered with him on a bear project, and essentially they wanted me to transition into this role, which then I ended up doing, and that was in January of 2021. And kind of in the interim, in this time in between that we knew the project was going to be starting, and before I actually went out to South Dakota State, he got a new position down in Oklahoma State in the Fish and Wildlife Research co-op unit down there.
So you were a cowboy.
Yeah, so I was cowboy.
Well, yeah.
So that's where I ended up going to grad school. So I was there for 2.5 years, doing my master's it was actually bear work in Pennsylvania here. And then really from there, I went out, once I finished my graduate degree, I went out and worked as a research associate out in New Mexico, on Vermejo Park Ranch out there, doing some cougar and bear work.
That's a terrible place to work.
No, it's a beautiful place. It's 550,000 acres of really pristine wilderness, I would say. It's not much in the way of urbanization or anything like that out there.
I got to spend some time in Vermejo in my past life, and obviously in the turkey business. I mean, Vermejo is one of those places that it's definitely one of the most special places to hear a Merriam's turkey gobble. And Vermejo is a beautiful place.
Oh yeah. So yeah, I worked with bears and cougars actually out there, and then that was just a brief stint. That was several months just over the summer there, and essentially came back to Stillwater at right by the university there in Oklahoma State, and really I just did some GIS work for the city there, and that was just more of a little bit of a placeholder job. I was there for 6 months doing GIS work, and then from there I actually got a position as a private lands biologist, and that was out in New Mexico. My area was the same area that Vermejo Park Ranch was in. Mm-hmm. So I had the northeast portion of New Mexico where I dealt with things from conflict with elk and just private landowner programs out there. Yeah.
Sure. Awesome. Well, we're glad to have you. We're glad to have you back.
Yeah.
And, you got a big program here in PA, and we're excited. We're excited. And the other thing, we talked earlier, you are a hunter. And
that's right. Yeah.
And which is cool because it's, if I lived in Oklahoma and New Mexico, I don't know if I could come back to Pennsylvania, but you come back to your roots and that's awesome. And we're so proud to have you. So, we're going to jump right into it. Now, you've been the bear biologist for how long?
A couple months? Over 3 months.
3 months. So,
yeah.
You got big plans, and I know that. We're going to talk about that. And obviously, this won't be the last time we're on here talking about bears here in Pennsylvania. But, looking at today, there's been a lot of changes in our season in the last few years. And, there's, some issues that we had to work with. And if we looked at it today, what would you say the current state of black bears are here in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, so bears occur. It's probably over 3/4 of the state of PA here. That that's their area that they're in. Outside of the far western extent and the far southeastern extent, that's where they mostly occur. And as far as like overall population, I would say it's relatively stable. I mean, we've been above between 14,000 to a little over 20,000 bears, really since like the early 2000s. Mm-hmm. So we've been in that, mid to high teens most of that time. So I would say it's relatively stable, and really it's just looking at kind of going forward, where exactly we do want that number.
Sure.
So that's really something that we're going to be figuring out.
When we got on the high side, in our existence here, it's when we saw a lot more human conflicts,
Right.
And that's, one of the reasons that those, earlier seasons were started. And it was with a purpose to get the population to a more stable level. And I mean, that's what your job is to manage that population and suggestions of where we should be as a state. And, when so many people look at, no matter what the wildlife, whether it's whitetails or turkeys or black bear, you're looking at it as a statewide process. It's not just in your favorite little honey hole or
right.
the county that you're in. You're looking at it with a statewide brush. And that's hard for myself. I'm sure it's hard sometimes for you, a lot of times for you to actually visualize it, because Pennsylvania is a pretty unique place.
Right. Yeah. And we, we want to minimize the conflicts that occur between bears and humans.
Sure.
But we also want to maximize, the amount of time a field hunters can be in the various bear seasons.
Right.
So it's really just finding that balance that we can get, kind of get all those things accounted for.
And when we say this, hunters, they're our number one conservation tool when
That's
it comes
right.
to wildlife, and especially on bears. I mean, we've proven that we can take that population where we need it. I mean,
That's right.
just by seasons adjustment and any of those things, those metrics that you use. And I say this all the time when you think about conservation, and you think about not too long ago, really, we didn't have any of these animals. They were gone from the landscape, and where we're at today, we're living in the best of times.
That's right. We just thinking back to the 70s or something like that. We had maybe roughly about 5,000 bears back then. So now we're in mid to high teens routinely. So it's a lot more bears that we have right now.
Sure. Yeah, we're a very lucky state. But let's talk about research here at the Game Commission. If we have any current research projects or what the future looks like, what things you're going to deep dive into, because research in bears, I think we probably lead the country probably in black bear research. Even when I look back in my lifetime, back to when Gary Alt was our bear biologist, he would talk about black bears on the square of any town in Pennsylvania because it was what he lived every day of his life.
That's right. So kind of just starting what we do annually here in PA. We tag between 700 to 800 roughly bears per year, and we use those bears that we tagged and then look for those tags later in the year, and with those tag returns that we get, we can estimate our population size through doing things like that. So we kind of lead the country in the amount of tags that we put out on bears, which is a great way to monitor things.
Sure.
Now we do have a new project that actually is just starting up this year, and it's really assessing bear survival. So it's a couple different things, and essentially it's looking at the core range that bears are in Pennsylvania, and we're going to be collaring males, females, and, adults, and yearlings, and basically assessing what their survivals are, through hunting season, but then also other times of the year. So this is really a huge project.
Yeah.
We're looking to get out 160 collars a year, and on unique individuals every single year. So this is looking at a lot of unique bears and just looking at that survival from all those different demographics, and also different regional differences.
I was gonna say, it's a statewide project.
Yes, this is a statewide project. So from that, we're basically going to look to see from that if we can estimate the population in maybe a more accurate way than just those simple tag returns. And the one model that is used that's more complex, it needs those survival estimates to really feed into that. So that's really the basis of why this project had started, and really just seeing what and when bears are harvested, and in all those different demographic groups across the state.
Right. When you and I'm going to throw one at you here. You think about bears, and on an average, how long does a bear live?
So when you look at what we have for bears, it's a little bit of a dichotomy. So you have male bears, and they tended to den later. So females tend to live longer. So we have
girls always win.
That's right. So we routinely have females in the the high teens.
Wow.
We've even had females in the 20s here in Pennsylvania. Whereas males, I think they're a lot less likely to get somewhere, into the teens, just because they're more likely to get harvested earlier in the year. Yeah.
Okay, that's great stuff. Because and I do want to. I'm just picking your brain a little bit from stuff you talk about when you say a bear's core range. Which do we have any? Is there any average of a bear's core range?
Yeah. So actually, part of that was looking what I looked at for my project, and this was just up in the Sproul State Forest. But actually, this survival project is going to provide us with home range estimates for all these different the demographics of bears across the state, and seeing how those change as well. But just from my estimates up in the Sproul State Forest, that was roughly about 250 square kilometers. Now this is in the fall when bears are they're making moves as they're fattening up in the
Sure.
fall. Now summer ranges are much less than something like that. But yeah, that was surprising considering these were adult female bears, and generally what's been recorded in the past has been smaller home ranges than what we found in that most current research. But then again, we were using the most one of the most up to date home range estimators, which has been shown to be more accurate than some of the traditional stuff that's been going on since the 70s, 80s, something like that.
And there's lots of variables, food
That's right.
source. I mean, and there's tons of variables, but it's pretty amazing. And here's one thing that and I want to talk about the life cycle of a bear next, because there's lots of things that when you think you've heard it all, but like I didn't know honestly until just recently when I came to work here that how much of a predator a black bear is, especially on whitetails. And let's talk about that.
Yeah,
it's just a fact.
Yeah, so most of the time, I'd say most of the year, bears are. I would like to call them like opportunistic omnivores. So they're going to be eating plant matter, acorns in the fall, but certainly when the opportunity presents itself for whether it be carrion, whether it be a whitetail fawn, and that was generally within like the first 2 weeks of the fawn's life is when the bears sniff them out.
Sure.
But yeah, I think that looking back to that fawn predation study that occurred, bears were the biggest predators of fawns in that study.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of times we think that bears just eat berries and nuts, and if you had to pick one food source, and I know I'm going down rabbit holes, but I think this is good for our folks. If you had to pick one food source in the fall of the year when hunters are getting out there that a bear craves or desires over another, would you have a suggestion?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, well, first it would probably depend on what forest type you're in.
Let's talk with Northwoods. I mean,
Northwoods. I mean, you'd be looking for things like cherries, but then also if you move into like mixed oak, obviously those high acorn, those high quantity acorn stands is where to be.
Beech nut.
Beech nut as well, and once we start getting up into like Tioga County up there. But one surprising thing that I had seen personally was black gum trees were really hit hard. So that's it seems to be a craved food source for them in the fall.
Yeah, someday we'll have to get in the woods with you and get the crew out with some the cameras and just show us some of that, because there's signs that bears leave up there that all of us have walked by and we never.
Oh yeah.
I've seen the nests in the tree where
Yeah.
And just stuff like that like everybody that spent time in the woods have walked by some of this sign that black bears leave, and we don't know what it is.
That's right. And some of those areas, like I've just seen through our GPS collars that we have out on those bears, they spend up to, about 3 to 4 days in some of those areas just climbing the trees and destroying the tops of the trees to get to all the food sources that are up there.
Sure.
And you go in and just find all the trees basically topped that are there.
So when you talk about, let's just talk about a year in the life of a bear. Breeding season. And when they have cubs. A lot of people don't understand how that whole gestation period works. And let's just go. For those that do know it, this is just a recap. But for somebody that wants to learn more, let's talk about that life cycle, if you will.
Yeah. So let's start. Let's start in the spring, I guess. So bears will come out of their den in probably in April, sometime in there. And they'll be exiting their winter den location,
which is like way under the ground.
Well, that really depends.
I'm learning that too.
Yeah, I mean, we can get into that just as a little side note right now. So as far as dens go, most people think like a rock cavity, a little cave, something like that. But here in PA, we have a kind of a wide range of what we get into, and a lot of them end up being ground nests. They look like what you envision maybe a big bird nest would look like, where all the mountain laurels just kind of woven together, or even just pushed down, and that's all they have to protect them for the winter. And just kind of goes to show how resilient and strong they are, that they can just lay out all winter even with cubs and just be like that. But we also have other types of dens, like they'll be in in brush piles, and also like root wad, areas where a tree has fallen over, and they'll dig an excavation into those roots that are exposed.
every one of us has probably walked by a bear den out there. And I feel that way. Like,
Yeah.
I feel that way about the biggest bucks of our lifetime. And weren't paying attention or didn't realize what we were looking at. I feel strong about that.
Yeah. And just for how difficult it is for us to find dens of, radio collared bears,
Mm-hmm.
if you have no idea that a bear's there and it's not making any kind of noise, you're just going to walk right by there unless you physically see the hole or see the bear.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. All right. I took you off subject.
No,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
Let's go back to that springtime life cycle.
Yeah. So, as they'll come out of the den there in April, and, they'll start feeding, on grasses and, things like that, skunk cabbage in some of the wetter areas. And then, summertime, then midsummer is when we kind of get into the breeding season. So we like to say like kind of right around July 4th weekend, that would be like the peak breeding season.
That's the bear rut.
That's right. Yeah.
Do they call it that? I don't
know. I mean, we can right now.
I got you.
But yeah, that's when peak breeding happens. And, sows can breed with multiple males. They don't, they essentially don't breed for life or, anything like that, like maybe some other species would. And essentially from there, those embryos, they don't start, the bears have a thing called delayed implantation. So they won't actually implant into the uterine wall until later. And they won't implant into the uterine wall and start growing until later in the year, which causes them to have, they have their cubs in their winter dens. So, roughly mid-January is when bears will have their offspring in the den. And part of that is because they basically breed in the summer and they wait until the fall and then start developing their embryos.
I got you. When they hit the den.
Yeah.
So this is probably a dumb question, and if they breed with multiple male bears, can they have two different sires?
Yeah, yes, they can.
Okay.
Yeah, they can have, and sometimes it's very evident. Just visually, you can see that things may be different. Now, I'm not sure if those are, that kind of correlates to different males, but
Sure.
Yes, they can have, for each cub, they can have a different boar that is the father of that bear.
Awesome. How many cubs as a normal?
Yeah, so typically we see 3.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the average for PA, which is really higher than most other states.
Is that because the habitats?
Yeah, that's the habitat that we got here. That's the food sources that we have here. But we typically see between 1 to 5. There's some unsubstantiated claims of 6. So potentially 6. We haven't seen it formally documented here in the state.
That'd be a lot of work.
That would, yeah, yep, for sure.
So let's talk about let's talk about males. On that life cycle too. And obviously, let's talk about the breeding season and then how they go into fall a little later.
Yeah, so I guess we can kind of get maybe to after the summer portion of things. So they'll breed in the summer, but that in between period in the fall, that's when bears are really looking for food sources, and they'll essentially try and find the best soft or hard mast or cornfield or what have you, and just try and pack on as much weight as they can prior to entering their winter den.
Both sexes, same
both
thing.
Both sexes, yeah. They're all doing that. And just from what we've seen, even adult females, they'll take large movements out of what their typical core home range would be. And bears can move a long distance in a short period of time. But yeah, as far as males, males' home ranges are generally larger than females. So they will be essentially moving through their territory and trying to breed multiple females that are all kind of interspersed in their home range there.
And I'm sure they live by a strict pecking order like any other wild animal too. There's a lot of fighting and stuff going on out there.
That's right. When we catch male bears in the summertime, a lot of times they're a little beat up from, if maybe they want to fight, maybe they lost the fight, but they still come away with some scars from that.
Absolutely. And then, gestation period, they have their cubs in the den. And when they come out of the den, I mean, this is something too that a lot of folks don't know. I mean, she doesn't have little ones every year.
That's right. So, a bear will have cubs. Let's just say they have cubs in January of a certain year. Those cubs will actually stay with her for the next year and a half before she pushes them off. So that next time that she's in a den, that following den season, she actually has them in, and now they're kind of classified as a yearling bear. So they're still in that den location with her, and then she will push them off prior to the breeding season of that subsequent year.
Is there any truth to this? And this is definitely out there. I hear this quite a bit. Is it true that males will try to get rid of the cubs in that in between year?
Yeah, so that's been shown that they will try that, and kind of with hopes of
her coming back into estrus.
Trying to force an estrus cycle,
right?
But to that extent, I'm not sure how much that actually occurs.
So in the next couple of weeks, and I know you guys have already been in the woods and starting these projects. You'll see. And some of our most popular things that we do is when we get to go out to a bear den and see the cubs. And a lot of people wonder, when we go in and get those cubs and you tag them, what are exactly what you're doing? We kind of talked about a lot of the studies. If you want to talk about some of the things in the past that we might have been going in there and getting the cubs, or what might be happening in the future when you see these bear dens.
Yeah. So as far as, just wait a second. So as far as what kind of happened in the past, we were more concerned about like overall reproductive metrics. So we were there for the cubs in that sense, looking at litter sizes, cub weights, all those kind of things. Mm-hmm. And right now, when we enter dens that do have cubs at them, we're looking at essentially like overall health of the bears. That kind of comes first and foremost when we're doing any kind of wildlife handling, but then we use those cubs do get ear tagged, and we can essentially use that in that tag return estimate for population size later in that year. So that's kind of what's been done traditionally on bears, and now kind of moving forward on this survival project that we have going on. We're going into dens and with hopes of collaring yearlings, which is a tall task because a lot of times sows with yearlings tend to just run away on us because they're much more mobile, considering they have fully mobile offspring with them at this point. So they're less likely to stay and more likely to hightail it away from us.
Right.
So it's a tall task to get yearlings collared, and that's essentially looking for their for their survival.
And I know sometimes too, like we come across a situation where there are orphan cubs. One of the great things that can happen is we can actually get those orphans in with another mother, and she most of the time accepts those.
Yes, as far as that, I'd like to say 100%, but nothing's 100% in with wild animals. But when you essentially sows are adult female bears or sows, they're very good mothers, and they'll take an orphan cub and then raise it as their own. And essentially, we just put that bear in with her other cubs, and she doesn't treat it really any different.
That's awesome. For folks listening, just imagine. I mean, working with these animals every day, the fascinating things you learn out there, and when you see some of that stuff hit, a lot of states you see bear den visits, and for us, like when we get the opportunity to go along on one and hit social media, it's cool to see a bear cub, but there's a lot of reason behind those den visits, and the information is vital for you to do your job. And black bears are pretty interesting. And when you think about black bears and what you said, like we have black bears in this state now in places we've never had them. They've really inhabited a lot of the state. You said 75% of the state.
Yeah,
now?
and kind of to that end, they're even starting to move into Ohio a little bit right now. There's actually some research starting up in Ohio looking at bear recolonization, and that I'm sure that's some of our bears in this state moving moving westward into like eastern Ohio.
And New York, same thing. Their bear population is growing in New Jersey
and just to New York's end, a lot of times our bears in the northern portion of the state, they end up, if we tag them in the summer trapping, and they'll end up getting harvested up in New York.
Oh wow!
And kind of vice versa. We'll get some bears coming down from New York as well.
They don't know the state line.
That's all right. They don't.
Exactly. So, obviously when there is bear-human conflict in around it, it makes the news. And
that's right.
We've had some cases this year and that one in particular in the Northeast. And I really want to, kind of end this talking about like a program that we have initiated. We're in early steps about BearWise. And I think it's important to all the residents of the Commonwealth to, remember these are wild animals. And so many times as humans, we do things that can put ourselves in danger. I mean, for the most part, bears want to get away from you. I mean, they're very intimidating. Even a 80, 100-pound bear is intimidating to me. They're fast and they're out there. They're predators. They're not as far at the top of the food chain that we are, but they're scary. And you should give the bears those respects. So if we could talk about, a couple things with BearWise that everybody needs to take away.
Yeah, I would say, overall, not approaching or feeding bears, that's the big thing is the most issues that we end up seeing are people that or bears that have been fed. And they end up causing conflict because then they associate us and just everyone with food. So then essentially they think this is food, I'm going to come and
opportunists.
And they're opportunistic. And if that's an easy meal, the bears they'll take that easy meal.
If we left work every night and got a cheeseburger at the same place for free, we'd be there every night. I mean, that's really, when you think about it, that's exactly right. It happens all the time. People feed bears and they love to watch them, but you're really doing that's when you see bears coming on people's porches, walking in through their front door. I mean, like you said, they're a wild animal. They're opportunists, but it's an easy meal for them.
That's right. Yeah, and it's something that we can see too. That a bear's whole behavior may change when it gets like that, and just their overall movement patterns. They'll move to they'll essentially act like almost like an accordion and try and hit every hot spot, and then they'll go back and hit every hot spot that they've gotten food at in the past, and just kind of move around the landscape like that, and really not act like a typical what we think of as like a wild bear that's fearful of humans. Obviously these bears they get a lot more. They're bold, and the overall fear of people just goes away, and that's when we could see the major issues happening. Right,
and talking about garbage and stuff like that too. To make sure it's secure.
That's right.
Again, they're opportunists, and every year, I mean, you just got to be vigilant out there and be BearWise.
Yeah, that's right. And just having containers that lock up, that kind of prevent bears from getting in there, whether that's your garbage containers, whether that be dumpsters, things like that that'd be really helpful.
I mean, look at the major cooler companies out there today that make their coolers bear-proof.
That's right.
It's a great marketing idea, but it's also very true. Yeah. Especially in camping in Western states where like New Mexico, where you have other kinds of bears around as well. I mean, is there grizzlies where you were out there?
No, there wasn't. No. But all black bears, but our bears, we are a little bit fortunate in that our bears are a little. They're not as bold as the Western bear, Western bears, but they could easily become that way through feeding or anything like that.
Well, we're here in the first week of March, and we're coming to that time where these bears been in the den. Let's talk about that before we get into this next point. A lot of people think bears go into the den and they sleep all winter, and that's the farthest thing from the truth.
That's not really true at all. Bears, they'll actively give birth in the den site. So they're awake, they're vigilant. It's just that everything is depressed in their metabolic functions through the winter. In the den, they won't eat, they won't defecate, but essentially they will be vigilant. So if something comes to try and take an offspring, they are able to defend their den. And sometimes we see where typically dogs may try and go up to a den site and they'll get swatted by a bear. So we see things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that you think about a lot, like a den and one sleeping. But as we're coming into this time of year, they're going to start coming out. How much weight roughly does a bear lose in denning as they're denning? Is there a weight loss, or do they stay the same? Or
So they definitely do lose a lot of weight. I'm not sure what that actual number looks like. They they obviously get fattened up as much as they can through the fall, and that fat reserve lasts them, for those several months. And when we have pregnant females, some of those bears are entering their dens, mid to late October, and then they're coming out in April. So you talk about being able to survive just off of your fat reserves and not eating or drinking anything for that many months. It's really incredible.
it is. So, but what they are is hungry when they come out.
That's
sure.
right. Yeah, they are hungry, so they are looking for a fast meal.
Right, and that's that's the next point. Like
Yeah.
on BearWise is bird feeders.
That's right.
We've been watching birds all winter long, and all of a sudden bears come out, and it's one of the biggest calls that we get. Are like, they just bend our pole that holds our bird feeder. I mean, they're going to find those meals.
Yeah, and they won't really discriminate between traditional bird feeders or hummingbird feeders.
Right.
They're going to try and take everything down. So when you see something like that, that's mostly what you want to do is take your feeders down, for a while,
Right.
and maybe that be like a week, and the bear will move on, hopefully, and then not be associating humans with food.
Right. Same with pet food. If you have pet food outside,
That's right.
I mean, it's another one that they're going to get after as well.
Yeah, and just kind of overall, food outside. Maybe you have vehicles with food inside, or remnants of foods inside, and windows down. Bears can get into cars.
Sure.
And a car after a bear's been in it is not probably a pleasant thing
I would imagine.
to go
I
into.
would imagine. So the biggest thing is be vigilant out there and think about it, and remember that black bears, all of our great 480 species here in Pennsylvania that we manage, they're all wild animals. We need to let them be wild. I think that's
right.
the most important thing we can think of in the back of our mind. So I have two more questions.
Yeah.
One is, so I should have asked this before, but so Oklahoma State and Penn State, when you think about wrestling, Penn State just sent a bunch of folks now that are at Oklahoma State coaching the Cowboys that came from Penn State. So if those two were wrestling, who would you be rooting for?
Oh, I'd be with Oklahoma State.
Oh man, that's a tough one here at the game commission. But I'm actually an Iowa fan, so we're going to get booed for that. The other thing, well, actually, three more questions. So I heard a story that you have to kind of tell us what happened with a rattlesnake and a bear trap. Obviously, Dave Mitchell, our deputy director, I asked him for a little story. He goes, "Ask him about that rattlesnake. Do you remember that one?"
I'm trying to think.
You keep a rock in the bear trap, and
so we had someone. What ends up happening when we trap bears is some of these areas have rattlesnakes at them, and when we trap bears with donuts, and they ended up attracting mice, which ends up attracting snakes in these areas, and we have had in the past kind of close calls where snakes blend in with the environment they're in, and kind of almost had someone get bit from that. Luckily, the snake didn't strike.
Nice,
but
that is lucky.
Yeah, and that's up in the Sprout State Forest area there, and I've stepped on a snake there, and luckily same thing. No actual strike or bite, but just got lucky on that.
So you'd rather deal with a black bear though than a rattlesnake?
That's right.
Yeah, I hear you. And the kind of the last thing, and I think this is a key one. As a hunter yourself, if you had one tip that maybe some folks that are out there bear hunting, no matter what part of the season that it's in, and I encourage people. We have our April meeting where seasons and bags are going to get approved, and your recommendations, and to pay attention and watch as because you're adjusting these seasons to our populations.
That's right.
I don't think it's going to be the same every year the way things are going. It would be my guess.
Right. Yeah.
But tune into our April meeting. You'll see the finalized seasons and bags for this fall. But it's always encouraging and encourage folks to pay attention in January and April to see what's going to happen the following year. And obviously, all those will be printed in the digest. But if you had one tip to our bear hunters out there, kind of in general, would it be something that you could give them without?
Yeah, I think overall, no matter the season, you always want to find the food. That's if you find the food source that bears are in, that's where they're going to be, and that's what they're trying to do in the fall.
Right, and they're going to leave telltale sign. for
That's right.
sure. And sometimes we overthink it. And I mean, that's a great tip. I mean, whitetail, anything you're hunting, I mean, they have to eat, they have to drink. You know, when
Yeah.
you find those sources, you can put yourself in the right spots.
Right. And if you just find those areas with, high acorns, just littered on the ground, or, beech nuts everywhere, those are the spots to be in, because that's, if you're keying into that, the bear's also keying into that.
And how good is a bear's nose? I mean,
It's incredible.
they live by their nose like a
Yep.
deer. Yeah.
Yeah, they do.
Some people don't think that and put that wind in their favor too, and I think that's an important key too. As well.
Yeah. A bear's smell is better than its vision. So they really live off of their what they can smell out. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Brandon, thank you.
Oh yeah.
And we appreciate it. Won't be our last time, and we're glad to have you back here at the Game Commission, heading up our bear program, and look forward to the next time. And keep doing a great job, buddy.
Thank you.
Absolutely.